October 14, 1988, 7:23 a.m. Federal Bureau of Investigation Field Office, Washington, D.C. Special Agent Michael Brennan holds a crumpled parking receipt between his thumb and forefinger, studying it under the fluorescent lights of the Document Analysis Lab. The receipt measures 3 inches by 2 inches, standard thermal paper from a Pentagon parking garage, date stamped April 12, 1988, validated for visitor access to Corridor 8, Ring C. Outside, morning frost covers the windows of parked sedans along Pennsylvania Avenue. Inside, the air smells of burnt coffee and photocopier toner. Brennan's hand trembles slightly. Not from cold, not from caffeine. He has been hunting Soviet illegals, deep-cover agents living under assumed American identities, for 11 years. He has chased ghosts through suburban neighborhoods where American flags hang from every third porch, where station wagons idle in driveways, where the enemy hides behind smiles and small talk about lawn fertilizer. He has found nothing. Every lead dissolves. Every suspect checks out clean. This parking receipt came from a routine IRS audit, nothing more. An accountant in Falls Church flagged unusual business expenses for a watch repair shop in Arlington, Virginia. The shop owner, Georg Fischer, claimed multiple trips to the Pentagon as business expenses, delivering repaired watches to military personnel. Plausible, mundane. Except the accountant noticed Fischer claimed these trips on days when the Pentagon parking garage system recorded no entry under his vehicle registration. Someone else drove Fischer's car into the Pentagon. Someone who showed identification. Someone who walked through security checkpoints wearing a visitor badge. Someone who spent hours inside the most secure military headquarters in the Western world 5 days a week for what Fischer's meticulously kept ledgers suggest was 15 years. Brennan sets the receipt down on the steel examination table. Through the lab's observation window, 3 other agents watch him, waiting for instructions. They have no idea what this receipt means. Not yet. They think this is another dead end in a career full of dead ends. Brennan knows better. He has studied the training manuals recovered from defectors. He knows how the KGB Directorate S, the directorate responsible for illegals, teaches patience. The first Chief Directorate Handbook, partially declassified in 1987, describes a strategy called decade placement. Insert an illegal, let them establish perfect cover for 10 to 15 years before activation. Become invisible, become trusted. Then when war comes or crisis erupts, strike from inside the enemy's heart. Georg Fischer has lived at 2847 South Joyce Street, Arlington, Virginia, for 16 years. His apartment sits 1.2 miles from the Pentagon's main entrance. He repairs watches, he pays taxes, he waves to neighbors. He has never once appeared in any FBI surveillance operation, any CIA counterintelligence review, any NSA communications intercept. And someone has been using his car to visit the Pentagon for 15 years. Brennan lifts his office telephone. His voice stays level, professional, despite the adrenaline now flooding his bloodstream. Get me the director's office. Tell him we have a situation. Tell him it's about Arlington. Tell him we might have found one. Outside, commuters stream toward their jobs. Inside the Pentagon, officers arrive for morning briefings, carrying coffee in disposable cups, discussing readiness reports and satellite imagery and the warming relationship between Reagan and Gorbachev. Nobody knows that an FBI agent in a document lab holds a piece of paper that will unravel one of the longest-running penetrations in American counterintelligence history. The receipt still smells faintly of motor oil and ink. Georg Fischer arrived in the United States on January 8, 1973, carrying a West German passport, a letter of recommendation from a Zurich watchmaking academy, and $3,000 in traveler's checks. He was 41 years old, dark-haired, unremarkable in appearance, the kind of man people forget 5 minutes after meeting. Immigration officials at Dulles International Airport stamped his visa without question. The letter from Zurich confirmed his credentials, trained in precision mechanical repair, specializing in military-grade chronometers and tactical timepieces. He told the customs officer he planned to open a small repair shop serving military personnel in the Washington metropolitan area. American servicemen owned quality watches, Omega, Rolex, Hamilton, that required expert maintenance. Fischer spoke English with a slight German accent, grammatically perfect but carrying the careful pronunciation of someone who learned the language in adulthood. He smiled politely. He answered questions directly. He carried no suspicious materials. The customs officer waved him through. Fischer rented a ground-floor commercial space at 2847 South Joyce Street in Arlington, 3 blocks from the Shirlington neighborhood, within walking distance of the Pentagon. The space measured 800 square feet, large enough for a workbench, customer counter, and small inventory of tools and parts. He placed advertisements in military newspapers. Precision watch repair, former Swiss Academy training, military timepieces a specialty. Within months, officers and enlisted personnel began bringing him their watches. A Navy commander brought a water-damaged submariner. An Air Force captain brought a Hamilton field watch his father wore in Korea. Fischer repaired them expertly, charged fair prices, returned them on time. His reputation grew through word of mouth. By 1975, Fisher had established himself as the preferred watchmaker for Pentagon personnel. He kept meticulous appointment books recording each customer's name, rank, watch model, and repair details. He paid his business taxes quarterly. He joined the Arlington Chamber of Commerce. He attended community meetings about zoning regulations and parking enforcement. To every observable measure, Georg Fisher was exactly what he appeared to be, a skilled immigrant craftsman building a modest American life. The FBI's Washington field office maintained general awareness of foreign nationals living near sensitive installations, but Fisher never triggered alerts. He held no security clearance. He never attempted to photograph military facilities. He never asked customers inappropriate questions about their work. Counterintelligence protocols focused on Eastern European immigrants with technical backgrounds who sought defense contractor employment or attempted to cultivate relationships with cleared personnel. Fisher did none of these things. He repaired watches. He lived quietly. He remained beneath notice. What the FBI did not know, what no American intelligence agency knew, was that Georg Fisher did not exist before January 1973. The real Georg Fisher died in a car accident outside Stuttgart, West Germany, in November 1972. He was unmarried, childless, with no living relatives. His death received minimal attention, a small obituary in a local newspaper, a brief police report filed and forgotten. KGB Directorate S officers, monitoring West German death records through informants and civil registry offices, identified Fisher as an ideal candidate for identity substitution. He matched the physical profile of a Soviet illegal currently completing training at the Red Banner Institute outside Moscow. He possessed legitimate credentials and a useful trade. His death left no one to contradict the continuity of his identity. The illegal, born Yevgeny Sergeyevich Volkov in Leningrad, 1932, assumed Fisher's identity completely. He memorized Fisher's childhood in Stuttgart, his apprenticeship in Zurich, his military service in the Bundeswehr. Directorate S provided authentic documents: Fisher's birth certificate, his watchmaking diploma, letters of reference from instructors who had taught the real Fisher. They created a seamless legend, a backstory that would withstand casual scrutiny. Volkov became Fisher. The transformation was total. His mission parameters, as later revealed in KGB documents released to researchers in 1992, specified long-term placement with minimal activity during establishment phase. Directorate S called this dormancy insertion. The illegal would build an authentic life, accumulate genuine credentials, establish unquestionable cover. Only after achieving complete integration would he receive activation orders. The timeline was deliberately extended. Minimum 10 years dormancy, with 15 years preferred. During those 15 years, Fisher would wait. He would repair watches, he would learn the rhythms of Pentagon life, the schedules of officers, the patterns of security protocols. He would become a trusted, invisible part of the landscape. And when the KGB needed him, when crisis came or opportunity emerged, he would be perfectly positioned to act. The strategy reflected Soviet intelligence doctrine shaped by decades of experience. The KGB had learned from failures. Illegals inserted too quickly, activated too soon, exposed through impatience. The Americans had sophisticated counterintelligence. The FBI had evolved since the Rosenberg era. Success required patience measured in decades, not years. But patience created vulnerability. The longer an illegal remained dormant, the more paper trail accumulated. The more receipts, the more tax records. The more documentation that might someday reveal inconsistencies. In April 1988, an IRS accountant named Patricia Whitmore reviewed Fisher's business expense deductions with routine thoroughness. She noticed something odd. Fisher claimed mileage and parking expenses for Pentagon visits on days when Pentagon records showed no vehicle entry under his registration. The discrepancy was small, perhaps 30 days over 5 years. Whitmore flagged it as possible tax fraud. Someone else might be using Fisher's car, allowing him to falsely claim business expenses. She forwarded her findings to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. They referred it to the FBI's white-collar crime unit. The case landed on Michael Brennan's desk not because anyone suspected espionage, but because Arlington fell within his jurisdictional territory. Brennan almost dismissed it. Tax fraud cases rarely interested him. But something about the Pentagon connection caught his attention. He requested Fisher's complete tax records. He studied the pattern of claimed visits. He noticed they concentrated during periods of heightened military activity. The 1983 Grenada operation, the 1986 Libya bombing, periods when Pentagon operational tempo increased. Then Brennan requested Pentagon visitor logs. He discovered that on days when Fisher claimed Pentagon visits but his car showed no entry, someone else had visited using Pentagon building passes issued to military personnel, officers who had their watches repaired by Fisher. The pieces assembled slowly. Fisher repaired watches for Pentagon officers. Those officers sometimes picked up their watches at Fisher's shop. But sometimes, especially during busy periods, Fisher offered to deliver completed repairs directly to the Pentagon, saving officers the trip during their workday. This service was informal, undocumented, appreciated. Fisher would arrive at the Pentagon, show identification, gain visitor access, and deliver watches to officers' offices. Except the visits didn't match Fisher's car registration. Someone else drove his car. Someone who could pass Pentagon security. Someone who had access to Fisher's customer list, his appointment schedule, his keys. Brennan requested surveillance photographs from Pentagon security archives. He found images of a man entering the Pentagon on 3 separate occasions in 1987 captured by newly installed security cameras in parking areas. The man matched Fisher's general description but showed subtle differences. Slightly different gait, different posture, different way of carrying himself. 2 men were using Georg Fisher's identity. One ran the watch shop, one visited the Pentagon. Brennan drafted a classified memorandum to FBI Director William Sessions on October 15, 1988. Subject may represent Soviet illegal operation with accomplice conducting intelligence collection activities within Pentagon facility. Recommend immediate surveillance authorization and technical coverage. The investigation, codenamed Watchmaker, officially began. The KGB's plan had worked almost perfectly for 15 years because it exploited a fundamental assumption, that identity is continuous. American counterintelligence expected illegals to infiltrate as single operators, maintaining one identity through sustained performance. The idea of paired illegals, 2 men sharing one legend, one physical identity, splitting operational duties, had not appeared in any FBI training manual or CIA assessment report. The strategy originated with Colonel Viktor Chernyavin, Deputy Director of Directorate S from 1969 to 1982, whose career in illegal operations began with post-war insertions into Western Europe. Chernyavin studied American counterintelligence failures from the Soviet perspective. What patterns did the FBI successfully detect? What behaviors triggered investigations? He concluded that illegals failed most often through accumulation of anomalies. A man could not simultaneously maintain deep cover and conduct aggressive intelligence collection. The lifestyle required for convincing cover, stable employment, community involvement, predictable routines, conflicted with operational requirements for surveillance, dead drops, agent meetings, and document photography. Chernyavin proposed a solution documented in Directorate S planning materials from 1970, deploy illegals in complementary pairs sharing one overt identity. One illegal would maintain the cover identity full-time, living the documented life, building the legend through genuine daily activity. The second illegal would use that established identity for operational purposes, appearing in public rarely but with legitimate documentation. The cover illegal provided authenticity, the operational illegal provided capability. The system required perfect coordination. Both men needed nearly identical physical characteristics, height, weight, facial structure, because they would be photographed intermittently by security systems. They needed absolute trust, complete compartmentalization, and flawless execution of identity exchange. If implemented correctly, American investigators would find a man with consistent employment history, tax records, and community presence, never suspecting that a second man occasionally borrowed that identity for missions inside secure facilities. Yevgeny Volkov became the cover illegal. Georg Fisher, the watchmaker. His twin brother, Anatoly Volkov, became the operational illegal, trained separately in technical intelligence collection and security penetration. The brothers had served together in naval intelligence before KGB recruitment. They shared physical characteristics that made them difficult to distinguish in photographs. Same height, 5'10", similar weight, 165 pounds, same dark hair color. With identical haircuts and similar clothing, they could pass for the same person under casual observation. The arrangement required precise choreography. Anatoly lived in a safe house maintained by a KGB support agent in Alexandria, Virginia, 4 miles from the watch shop. He ventured out only for operations, dressed identically to Yevgeny, carrying identification documents prepared by Directorate S forgery specialists. When Anatoly needed to visit the Pentagon, Yevgeny would close the shop for appointments or errands. Anatoly would take Yevgeny's car, his keys, his visitor passes, accumulated through years of legitimate watch delivery visits, and drive to the Pentagon. Pentagon security, seeing the name Georg Fisher on visitor logs from previous authorized entries, seeing a middle-aged watchmaker delivering repaired timepieces to officers who knew him, passed him through without additional scrutiny. Anatoly would proceed to deliver watches to legitimate customers, maintaining the cover story, and then deviate to conduct intelligence collection. The collection activities, revealed through FBI investigation and later KGB defector testimony, focused on observational intelligence rather than document theft. Anatoly memorized office layouts, security procedures, personnel schedules, and equipment locations. He identified which offices contained classified material storage. He noted patterns in guard rotations and badge check procedures. He observed which staff members exhibited security carelessness, doors propped open, documents left visible, conversations held in hallways. This intelligence supported broader KGB strategic assessments of Pentagon security vulnerabilities. If war came, if tensions escalated beyond diplomatic control, this detailed knowledge of Pentagon internal geography would guide Spetsnaz or GRU operations. Where to insert agents, which offices to target, how to move through the building without detection. But Anatoly never stole documents, he never photographed materials, he never made copies. These activities created evidence, paper trails, missing files, security alerts. His mission was observation only, gathering knowledge that would exist only in his memory and in encrypted reports transmitted through dead drops to KGB handlers operating under diplomatic cover at the Soviet embassy. The system worked because it accepted limitations. Anatoly visited the Pentagon approximately once every 3 weeks, frequent enough to maintain familiarity, infrequent enough to avoid pattern recognition by security personnel. Each visit lasted 30 to 90 minutes. He never lingered, he never asked questions, he delivered watches, moved through corridors with purposeful efficiency, and departed. For 15 years, no one noticed. Security cameras, introduced gradually during the 1980s, captured images of Georg Fischer that showed slight variations in appearance, but variations easily explained by different lighting, aging, or camera quality. No analyst compared images systematically. No one suspected that two different men appeared in photographs labeled with the same name. The vulnerability emerged from economics, not espionage tradecraft. To maintain convincing business records, Yevgeny kept meticulous tax documentation. He recorded every Pentagon visit as a business expense, mileage, parking fees, time spent. These records demonstrated business legitimacy, created documentary evidence of ongoing operations, and provided deduction claims that reduced tax liability. For years, this documentation posed no risk. Tax audits focused on excessive or fraudulent deductions, not on verifying exact correlation between claimed expenses and independently recorded events. Patricia Whitmore's audit in early 1988 happened to coincide with Pentagon implementation of a new automated parking system. Previous parking records were manual, incomplete, easily dismissed. The new system recorded every vehicle entry electronically, license plate, time, duration. When Whitmore cross-referenced Fisher's claimed parking expenses against Pentagon parking database entries, she found systematic discrepancies. Fisher's ledgers claimed parking fees on 37 days over 5 years when Pentagon systems showed no entry for his registered vehicle. Small discrepancy, explainable through database errors or manual entry bypasses, but worth investigation. Whitmore had no idea she had found evidence of the longest-running successful illegal penetration of Pentagon facilities in Cold War history. She thought she found garden-variety tax fraud. The receipt, the single thermal-printed parking receipt that landed on Michael Brennan's desk, came from April 12, 1988, a day when Yevgeny's ledgers claimed a Pentagon visit but parking records showed no entry for his vehicle. Someone else drove Yevgeny's car into the Pentagon that day. Someone who showed identification, gained access, and spent 45 minutes inside the building. Brennan understood immediately that this was not tax fraud. This was something far more significant. This was a ghost becoming visible through paper trail archaeology, the inevitable consequence of maintaining deep cover for longer than operational security could sustain. Surveillance began on October 18, 1988, with a team of 8 FBI special agents rotating observation posts around Fisher's watch shop and apartment. The operation required absolute discretion. If Fisher detected surveillance, he would either vanish or maintain dormancy, making prosecution impossible. If he vanished, his intelligence network, his handlers, his support agents, his communication methods would vanish with him. Brennan wanted the entire network, not just one illegal, not just one spy. He wanted to roll up the support structure that had kept Fisher operational for 15 years. The surveillance team documented Fisher's daily routine with exhaustive detail. Yevgeny opened the watch shop at 9 o'clock a.m. 6 days per week. He ate lunch at a nearby delicatessen at 12:30 p.m., always ordering the same sandwich. Turkey on rye, mustard, no lettuce. He closed the shop at 6 p.m. He walked home, 7 blocks, approximately 14 minutes at his consistent pace. He purchased groceries at a Safeway on Thursday evenings. He attended a Lutheran church on Sunday mornings, sitting in the 4th pew from the front on the left side. Nothing in his behavior suggested espionage awareness. He never checked for surveillance. He never varied his route home. He never made sudden detours or employed counter-surveillance techniques that would indicate training. But on October 31, 1988, surveillance teams noted an anomaly. At 2:15 p.m., Fisher closed his shop early, placing a handwritten sign in the window. Closed for appointment, return tomorrow. He walked to his apartment, remained inside for 90 minutes, then emerged wearing different clothing, a gray business suit instead of his usual work clothes. He drove his Chevrolet sedan toward the Pentagon. Surveillance units followed at maximum distance, using rotating vehicle positions to avoid detection. Fisher parked in the Pentagon North parking area at 4:22 p.m. He entered the building through the Mall Terrace entrance, showing identification to security personnel. Surveillance agents could not follow into secure areas without revealing their presence. Brennan, monitoring from the FBI field office, made a critical decision: allow the visit to proceed. Arresting Fisher at the Pentagon would yield one illegal but destroy the investigation into his network. Better to watch, document, and build a comprehensive case. Fisher emerged from the Pentagon at 5:38 p.m. He drove home. He changed back into work clothes. He reopened the shop the next morning at exactly 9 o'clock a.m. Brennan requested Pentagon security footage from October 31st. The footage showed Fisher, or someone using his identification, delivering a watch repair to an Air Force colonel in Corridor 8, Ring C. The delivery took 11 minutes. Fisher then walked toward a public restroom on Corridor 7. Security camera coverage had a 12-foot gap near the restroom entrance, an architectural blind spot. Fisher disappeared from camera view for 18 minutes. When he reappeared, he proceeded directly to the exit. 18 minutes. Enough time to photograph documents, transcribe information, or plant surveillance equipment. The FBI requested technical surveillance authorization from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court on November 2, 1988. Authorization granted. FBI technical teams installed audio monitoring in Fisher's apartment and shop during the overnight hours of November 5 to 6, entering while Yevgeny slept, placing microphones in ventilation ducts and telephone intercepts in junction boxes. The surveillance revealed nothing incriminating. Yevgeny spoke rarely. He conducted business conversations with customers in person. He made no suspicious phone calls. He received no visitors. Brennan began to suspect they were watching the wrong man. On November 14, 1988, Fisher closed his shop at 11 o'clock a.m. with another handwritten sign. Personal errand, back at 2 o'clock p.m. Surveillance teams followed him to a shopping center in Alexandria, where he entered a hardware store. He remained inside for 43 minutes, far longer than necessary for typical hardware purchases. Surveillance agents entered the store after Fisher departed. They questioned the clerk who had assisted him. The clerk described a man asking detailed questions about lock mechanisms and security systems. Questions that seemed odd for a watchmaker buying routine supplies. The FBI obtained security footage from the hardware store. The man in the footage matched Fisher's general appearance, but moved with different body language. His gait was slightly different. His posture was straighter. His gestures were more confident. Brennan requested facial recognition analysis, a relatively new technology in 1988, utilizing early computer-assisted image comparison. FBI analysts compared the hardware store footage against Pentagon security images from October 31st and against photographs of Fisher at his watch shop. The analysis revealed subtle but measurable differences: ear position relative to skull structure, distance between eyes, nose bridge angle. Two different men were using Georg Fisher's identity. Brennan authorized physical surveillance escalation. On November 23, 1988, when Fisher closed his shop for another appointment, surveillance teams deployed tracking units on his vehicle using magnetic GPS transponders, experimental technology recently approved for FBI counterintelligence use. The transponders revealed that Fisher's car traveled to an address in Alexandria, 4521 Beauregard Street, apartment 12B. The apartment was leased under the name Robert Mitchell, occupied since 1984, rent paid consistently through automated bank transfers. FBI records checks revealed Mitchell as an employee of a telecommunications contractor, a cover identity that provided income documentation without requiring daily workplace attendance. The FBI obtained surveillance authorization for 4521 Beauregard Street. Overnight installation of audio monitoring revealed two male voices conversing in Russian. Brennan now understood the operation's architecture. Yevgeny Volkov maintained the Georg Fisher identity publicly. Anatoly Volkov lived under the Robert Mitchell identity in Alexandria. When Pentagon visits or other operational tasks were required, Anatoly borrowed Yevgeny's identity, becoming Fisher temporarily. The system allowed Yevgeny to maintain authentic cover while Anatoly conducted intelligence operations. The question became how to arrest both men simultaneously without alerting their KGB handlers or support network. The FBI's dilemma was operational and legal. Anatoly had committed espionage, entering the Pentagon under false pretenses, conducting surveillance of secure facilities. But proving espionage required evidence of intelligence collection, evidence currently unavailable. Yevgeny had committed immigration fraud by using a false identity, but had not directly participated in Pentagon penetrations. Arresting one brother would alert the other. Arresting both without sufficient evidence might result in deportation rather than prosecution. Brennan needed them caught in the act of intelligence transmission. He needed to document their communication with KGB handlers. He needed evidence that would sustain espionage charges in federal court. FBI surveillance teams intensified coverage throughout December 1988. Audio monitoring of both apartments revealed careful compartmentalization. The brothers never discussed operational matters indoors, aware of surveillance possibilities, trained in communication security. They met in public parks, walking trails, shopping centers where conversations could occur without electronic monitoring. But the FBI had anticipated this. Directional microphones deployed from surveillance vehicles parked near meeting locations captured fragments of conversation. Russian language specialists translated in real time. The brothers discussed timing, schedules, and procedures, but never specific intelligence content. Their tradecraft was excellent, honed through years of training and operational experience. The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. On December 18, 1988, NSA Signals Intelligence detected encrypted burst transmissions originating from Alexandria, Virginia, directed towards Soviet diplomatic facilities. The transmissions lasted less than 3 seconds each, too brief for real-time triangulation, but long enough for NSA monitoring stations to capture and analyze. NSA cryptanalysts determined the transmissions used a one-time pad encryption system, theoretically unbreakable without the physical decryption key. But transmission timing and frequency patterns suggested regular intelligence reporting, weekly uploads of collected information. The FBI requested NSA provide transmission origin coordinates. NSA triangulation placed the source within a 2-block radius of 4521 Beauregard Street. Anatoly was transmitting intelligence reports from his apartment using a concealed shortwave radio. Brennan proposed a strategy to FBI Deputy Director Floyd Clark: allow the next transmission to proceed, then execute simultaneous arrests of both brothers immediately afterward, seizing transmission equipment and any physical documentation before either brother could destroy evidence. Clark approved, with one addition: coordinate with CIA counterintelligence to identify KGB handlers at the Soviet embassy who received the transmissions. Arresting the illegals without compromising their handlers would allow the KGB to insert replacement agents using similar methodologies. The FBI and CIA established joint surveillance of Soviet diplomatic personnel in Washington, monitoring for individuals who might serve as illegal handlers. This surveillance identified 3 Soviet diplomats who traveled regularly to Northern Virginia, always during evening hours, always alone, following routes consistent with counter-surveillance protocols. One diplomat, identified through CIA records as Major Alexei Fedorov of the KGB First Chief Directorate, appeared particularly active. Fedorov held a cover position as a cultural attaché, but displayed none of the behaviors typical for legitimate diplomatic cultural work. He attended no cultural events, visited no museums, met no artists or academics. Instead, he drove through Arlington and Alexandria neighborhoods, making brief stops at commercial locations, parking lots, office buildings, shopping centers, where dead drops could be serviced. The FBI placed Fedorov under dedicated surveillance on December 22, 1988. Agents watched him park at a shopping center near 4521 Beauregard Street at 8:45 p.m., walk through the parking lot examining vehicles, and stop briefly beside a gray Chevrolet sedan, Yevgeny's car, currently parked outside Anatoly's apartment building. Fedorov bent down beside the car as if tying his shoe. When he stood, something had transferred from his hand to the vehicle's undercarriage. He walked away, returned to his vehicle, and departed. FBI technical teams approached the Chevrolet after Fedorov left. Attached magnetically to the undercarriage, hidden behind the rear axle, was a small metal container, a classic dead drop cache. Inside, a one-time pad code sheet and instructions written in Russian. The FBI photographed the contents, replaced them exactly, and withdrew. Anatoly would retrieve the cache and use the one-time pad for his next transmission. The FBI now had physical evidence connecting the Volkov brothers to active KGB handlers. Brennan proposed final operational plan on December 28, 1988. Allow Anatoly to conduct his next scheduled transmission, NSA analysis predicted early January based on previous timing patterns, arrest both brothers immediately afterward, execute search warrants on both residences simultaneously, and detain Fedorov for questioning as a hostile intelligence officer conducting illegal operations on U.S. soil. FBI Director Sessions approved the plan with one modification: arrest Fedorov only after securing evidence from the Volkov residences. Detaining a Soviet diplomat without ironclad justification would create diplomatic complications. Better to have physical evidence, transmission equipment, code sheets, intelligence reports, before confronting the Soviet embassy with espionage accusations. The FBI waited. NSA Signals Intelligence detected a burst transmission from Alexandria on January 7, 1989 at 9:47 p.m. Duration 2.3 seconds. Direction towards Soviet embassy communications facilities in Washington, D.C. At 10:15 p.m., FBI hostage rescue team agents executed simultaneous tactical entries on 22847 South Joyce Street and 4521 Beauregard Street. Both entries achieved complete surprise. Neither brother resisted. Yevgeny Volkov, arrested in his apartment above the watch shop, said nothing. He sat calmly on his sofa while agents searched his residence, his expression revealing neither fear nor surprise. He had been preparing for this moment for 16 years. He knew his role: admit nothing, demand counsel, wait for diplomatic intervention. Anatoly Volkov, arrested in the Alexandria apartment, attempted to destroy evidence. Agents entering his apartment found him standing over a kitchen sink, burning papers with a cigarette lighter. The papers were partially destroyed. Fragments remained, showing handwritten notes in Russian describing Pentagon corridor layouts and security procedures. Agents also seized a shortwave radio transmitter hidden inside a hollowed-out encyclopedia, a collection of one-time pad sheets concealed in a false bottom drawer, and a 35mm camera with telephoto lens. Both brothers were transported to FBI headquarters for processing. Both invoked their right to silence. Both requested contact with the Soviet embassy. FBI search teams spent 18 hours processing both residences. At the Joyce Street apartment, they found Yevgeny's meticulous business records, 15 years of customer appointments, repair logs, and tax documentation. They found watch repair tools, parts inventory, and technical manuals. They found nothing that proved espionage. Yevgeny had maintained perfect cover. At the Beauregard Street apartment, they found Anatoly's operational materials. In addition to the transmission equipment and burned papers, they found maps of Pentagon facilities marked with handwritten annotations in Russian, photographs of Pentagon building entrances and security checkpoints, visitor passes issued to Georg Fischer over multiple years, and a journal written in Russian documenting observation reports from Pentagon visits dating back to 1979. The journal entries, later translated and admitted as evidence during prosecution, provided devastating proof of long-term intelligence collection. Sample entry from March 15, 1984. Corridor 8, Ring C, storage room accessed by 3 personnel observed during afternoon shift. Lock mechanism standard Schlage commercial grade, no keypad override, documents visible through door window during 14:30 opening. Guard rotation pattern suggests 20-minute vulnerability window between 1400 to 1420. The entries documented 9 years of systematic surveillance. Anatoly had mapped Pentagon internal geography with precision that would enable hostile insertion teams to navigate the building's 17.5 miles of corridors and locate specific high-value targets. The FBI had caught them, but the magnitude of the penetration, 15 years of access, hundreds of visits, comprehensive intelligence collection, shocked even experienced counterintelligence officers. Brennan held the journal in the FBI evidence room on January 8, 1989, reading translated entries by flashlight at 3:00 a.m. He had been awake for 20 hours. Around him, evidence technicians cataloged seized materials, photographed documents, processed fingerprints. The room smelled of paper and dust and the particular staleness that accumulates around old secrets. He turned to a journal entry from June 1982. Observed conversation between 2 colonels near Corridor 4 cafeteria discussing satellite reconnaissance scheduling. Subject mentioned Tuesday morning pass over specific coordinates, not recorded, but context suggested Middle East theater. Security awareness extremely poor. Classified discussion conducted in open corridor. Recommend future collection focus on cafeteria and informal gathering spaces where personnel relax operational security. The tradecraft was patient, observational, brilliant in its simplicity. Anatoly never stole documents. He listened, he watched, he remembered. He transmitted summaries that guided broader KGB intelligence priorities. And he had done it for 15 years, hiding behind his brother's identity, invisible to American counterintelligence until a parking receipt exposed a minor discrepancy in tax records. Brennan closed the journal. He looked at the watch on his wrist. An automatic Seiko, nothing special, purchased at a department store. He thought about the hundreds of officers who had trusted Georg Fischer with their watches, never suspecting that their friendly Arlington watchmaker was a gateway for hostile intelligence penetration into the heart of American military command. The watch on Brennan's wrist read 3:17 a.m. The second hand swept forward, marking time that could never be recovered, security that could never be fully restored. The Soviet embassy responded with predictable outrage. On January 9, 1989, Ambassador Yuri Dubinin delivered a formal diplomatic protest to the State Department, claiming the FBI had arrested 2 innocent civilians, a naturalized American citizen and his brother, on fabricated charges designed to poison U.S.-Soviet relations during a period of warming diplomatic engagement. The Reagan administration, in its final days before President George H.W. Bush's inauguration, responded with declassified evidence. The State Department released selected photographs from FBI searches, the shortwave radio transmitter, the one-time pad sheets, the Pentagon maps marked in Russian. The evidence was irrefutable. The Soviets modified their position. Dubinin acknowledged that certain individuals may have engaged in unauthorized activities, but denied official KGB involvement. He proposed a quiet resolution. Allow both brothers to leave the United States voluntarily, avoiding public trial that would embarrass both governments. The Bush administration, sworn in January 20, 1989, faced a strategic decision. Prosecuting the Volkov brothers in open court would expose 15 years of security failures, hundreds of unauthorized Pentagon visits, systematic intelligence collection conducted beneath FBI's awareness. The prosecution would reveal embarrassing details about Pentagon security vulnerabilities, dead drop locations, and counter-surveillance techniques. Alternatively, deporting the Volkovs quietly would avoid public humiliation, but would also deny the American intelligence community valuable opportunities to interrogate the brothers, understand their full operational methods, and identify other Soviet illegals potentially operating under similar cover arrangements. FBI Director William Sessions advocated prosecution. He argued that Soviet illegals must face consequences sufficient to deter future operations. CIA Director William Webster advocated deportation. He argued that public trials would expose sources and methods while providing minimal strategic benefit. President Bush, after reviewing classified briefings on the case's full scope, chose prosecution with restricted disclosure. The Volkov brothers would be charged with espionage, but trial proceedings would incorporate classified evidence procedures limiting public revelation of operational details. The prosecution would send a deterrence signal to Soviet intelligence while protecting American counterintelligence capabilities. On February 15, 1989, a federal grand jury indicted Yevgeny Volkov and Anatoly Volkov on charges including conspiracy to commit espionage, false identity fraud, and unauthorized entry into restricted government facilities. The indictment, partially sealed to protect classified information, detailed the brothers' operation without revealing specific Pentagon security procedures or FBI surveillance techniques. The brothers' defense attorney, appointed after the Soviet embassy declined to provide legal support, argued that Yevgeny was an unwitting participant who maintained legitimate business activities while his brother conducted unauthorized actions. The prosecution demonstrated through financial records and surveillance evidence that Yevgeny knowingly facilitated Anatoly's Pentagon access by providing identification documents, vehicle access, and cover stories for absences from the shop during operational periods. Both brothers were complicit. Both had knowingly participated in a decade and a half of intelligence operations against the United States. The trial began on September 11, 1989, in the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia. Judge Albert V. Bryan, Jr. presided over proceedings conducted partially under Classified Information Procedures Act provisions, which allowed sensitive evidence to be presented in closed sessions without public or media access. The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Helen Fahey, presented a methodical case built on documentary evidence rather than dramatic testimony. Fahey introduced tax records showing the discrepancies that initiated the investigation. She presented Pentagon visitor logs documenting hundreds of entries under Georg Fischer's name spanning 15 years. She introduced surveillance photographs showing two different men using the same identity. She displayed the journal seized from Anatoly's apartment, with translated excerpts read into the court record. The most damaging evidence came from technical analysis. FBI forensic document examiners testified that handwriting on Pentagon visitor logs showed variations consistent with two different individuals signing the same name. Facial recognition experts presented comparative analysis of security camera footage, demonstrating measurable anatomical differences between the Georg Fischer who ran the watch shop and the Georg Fischer who visited the Pentagon. The defense attempted to argue entrapment and prosecutorial overreach, suggesting the FBI had manufactured evidence of espionage from what were essentially immigration violations. The strategy collapsed when prosecutors introduced Anatoly's journal entries in their original Russian alongside certified translations. The entries contained technical intelligence observations, security procedures, personnel patterns, facility vulnerabilities that served no purpose except hostile intelligence collection. On November 3, 1989, the jury deliberated for 7 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts for both brothers. Yevgeny showed no emotion when the verdict was read. Anatoly closed his eyes briefly, then returned to the same neutral expression both brothers had maintained throughout the trial. Judge Bryan scheduled sentencing for December 15, 1989. Federal sentencing guidelines for espionage carried potential sentences ranging from 10 years to life imprisonment, depending on damage assessment and scope of intelligence compromised. But history intervened in ways no one anticipated. On November 9, 1989, 6 days after the Volkov brothers' conviction, the Berlin Wall fell. East Germany collapsed. The Cold War's foundational division began crumbling in real time, broadcast on television networks worldwide. Within weeks, communist governments across Eastern Europe fell in rapid succession. The Soviet Union itself entered terminal crisis. The geopolitical context for the Volkov prosecution transformed completely. What began as a Cold War espionage case in January 1989 concluded in a world where the Cold War's end appeared imminent. The brothers had spent 15 years collecting intelligence for a superpower structure that was disintegrating as they awaited sentencing. On December 15, 1989, Judge Bryan sentenced both brothers to 25 years in federal prison, substantial sentences reflecting the operation's scope but falling short of the life terms prosecutors had requested. Bryan's sentencing remarks acknowledged the changing international situation. The defendants operated during a period of genuine hostility between superpowers. That hostility appears to be diminishing. Nevertheless, their actions represented systematic betrayal of American security over a decade and a half. The sentence must reflect the severity of that betrayal while recognizing that the context in which they operated has fundamentally changed. The Volkov brothers entered the federal prison system in January 1990. The FBI expected they would serve their full sentences. Instead, they became bargaining chips in post-Cold War diplomacy. Throughout 1990 and 1991, the Soviet Union continued its collapse. KGB operations were systematically exposed as former Eastern Bloc intelligence services opened their archives and defectors emerged offering information in exchange for Western asylum. The CIA and FBI received unprecedented access to information about Soviet illegal operations in the United States, identifying networks that had operated for decades without detection. In this context, the Volkov brothers represented valuable intelligence sources. They had worked within the KGB illegal system for over 20 years, trained at the Red Banner Institute, deployed through Directorate S channels, supported by handlers and support agents whose identities remained unknown. Interrogating them thoroughly could reveal operational methods, training procedures, communication protocols, and identification of other illegals potentially still operating under deep cover. But the brothers refused cooperation. From January 1990 through August 1991, FBI and CIA interrogators conducted over 200 interview sessions with Yevgeny and Anatoly at their separate prison facilities. Both brothers declined to provide substantive information. They confirmed only what prosecutors had already proven in court. They refused to identify handlers, support agents, training instructors, or communication methods beyond what physical evidence had revealed. They were protecting sources, colleagues still operational, methods still viable, or they were simply loyal to an organization that had trained them, deployed them, and abandoned them when politically convenient. The impasse broke in August 1991. The failed hardline coup against Mikhail Gorbachev in Moscow accelerated the Soviet Union's final disintegration. In December 1991, the Soviet Union officially dissolved. The KGB was disbanded, its functions distributed among new Russian intelligence services. The institutional structure that had deployed and supported the Volkov brothers ceased to exist. In January 1992, the new Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, successor to the KGB's first chief directorate, approached the CIA through diplomatic channels with an unusual proposal. Russia would provide comprehensive information about Cold War illegal operations in the United States, including identification of support networks and unused dead drop locations, in exchange for release and repatriation of Russian intelligence officers currently imprisoned in the United States. The proposal included the Volkov brothers on a list of 12 imprisoned officers Russia sought to repatriate. The exchange would be framed as a humanitarian gesture supporting improved U.S.-Russian relations in the post-Cold War era. The Bush administration debated the proposal throughout early 1992. The FBI opposed release, arguing that the brothers had served only 2 years of 25-year sentences. Releasing them would send terrible signals about consequences for espionage. The CIA supported the exchange, arguing that information Russia offered about Soviet illegal networks outweighed the value of continued imprisonment. President Bush approved the exchange on March 15, 1992. On April 3, 1992, Yevgeny and Anatoly Volkov were released from federal custody, transported to Andrews Air Force Base, and flown to Moscow aboard a Russian diplomatic aircraft. In exchange, Russian intelligence provided the CIA with archived KGB documents detailing illegal operations conducted in the United States from 1965 through 1990. The documents revealed that the Volkov operation was not unique. The KGB had deployed at least 17 paired illegal teams into the United States between 1970 and 1985, all using variations of the same operational model. One illegal maintaining public cover identity, a second using that identity for intelligence operations. The FBI initiated investigations into all 17 cases based on the Russian-provided information. Most illegals had already departed the United States as the Soviet Union collapsed. 3 remained and were quietly arrested, prosecuted, and imprisoned through 1993 and 1994. The Volkov brothers returned to Moscow as minor heroes in certain intelligence circles, professionals who had maintained operational security for 15 years, who had collected valuable intelligence, who had resisted interrogation even when their country abandoned them. Russian intelligence services offered them pensions and recognition. Yevgeny declined. He had spent 15 years pretending to be Georg Fischer, a German watchmaker who built an American life. The pretense had become partially real. He had genuinely learned to appreciate the craft of watch repair, the satisfaction of precision mechanical work, the quiet rhythms of small business ownership. Returning to Russia meant abandoning the only identity that felt authentic. Anatoly accepted the pension and lived quietly in a Moscow apartment until his death from cancer in 2004. He gave no interviews. He wrote no memoirs. He remained silent about his operational years, loyal to tradecraft principles that secrecy extended beyond active service into retirement. Yevgeny emigrated to Germany in 1993, settling in Stuttgart, the city where the real Georg Fischer had been born. He opened a small watch repair shop under his real name, Yevgeny Volkov, advertising services in Russian immigrant newspapers. He repaired watches for Russian expatriates, German customers, anyone who appreciated traditional mechanical craftsmanship. He died in 2011 at age 79, his obituary in the Stuttgarter Zeitung describing him simply as a skilled watchmaker who came to Germany late in life but contributed to the city's tradition of precision craftsmanship. The obituary made no mention of his 16 years in America, his brother's Pentagon penetrations, or his role in one of the Cold War's longest-running espionage operations. FBI Special Agent Michael Brennan retired in 2003 after 32 years of service. The Volkov case remained his most significant counterintelligence success, and his most profound frustration. He had caught them, proven their guilt, secured convictions. And then politics and diplomacy had released them after serving minimal sentences. In a 2009 interview for an FBI internal history project, Brennan reflected on the case. "We got lucky. A parking receipt. If that IRS accountant hadn't been particularly thorough, if Pentagon parking systems hadn't been recently upgraded to electronic tracking, if Fisher hadn't been quite so meticulous about documenting his business expenses, they might still be operational today. That's what troubles me. Not the ones we caught, the ones we didn't. How many other illegals operated successfully and were never detected? How many left the United States quietly when the Soviet Union collapsed, having completed decades of intelligence collection without ever appearing on our radar? The question remains unanswered. KGB archives, released to researchers in the 1990s, confirmed Soviet illegal deployments but did not provide complete operational details. Many files were destroyed during the Soviet collapse. Others remain classified by Russian intelligence services. The full scope of Cold War illegal operations in the United States will likely never be fully known. The lasting impact of the Volkov case reshaped American counterintelligence methodology in subtle but significant ways. The FBI's counterintelligence division implemented new protocols for long-term illegal detection, focusing on documentary inconsistencies rather than behavioral surveillance. Tax records, parking receipts, utility bills, banking patterns, the paper trail of normal life became primary investigative focus. The Pentagon revised security procedures for visitor access. Biometric identification systems were implemented gradually through the 1990s, requiring fingerprint or retinal scans that could not be shared between individuals. Visitor escort requirements were strengthened. No visitor could move through Pentagon corridors unaccompanied, regardless of familiarity or previous access history. These changes closed vulnerabilities the Volkov operation had exploited, but they also acknowledged a troubling reality. Security systems designed to detect hostile individuals were ineffective against illegals who achieved genuine integration into American society. The real Georg Fischer, had he lived, would have passed every security screening. The KGB's substitution was nearly perfect. The case influenced CIA assessments of Russian intelligence capabilities in the post-Cold War era. Initial optimism that Russian services would be weakened by the Soviet collapse proved premature. The same officers who ran KGB illegal programs in the 1970s and 1980s continued operating similar programs for Russian Foreign Intelligence Service in the 1990s and 2000s. The tradecraft evolved: better document forgery, more sophisticated cover legends, improved communication security, but the strategic approach remained consistent. In 2010, the FBI arrested 10 Russian illegals operating in the United States under deep cover identities, including Anna Chapman, who gained international media attention. The 2010 case, known as Operation Ghost Stories, revealed that Russian intelligence had maintained illegal operations throughout the post-Cold War period, using methods remarkably similar to those employed by the Volkov brothers: long-term placement, patient cultivation of cover identities, minimal operational activity during establishment phase. The Ghost Stories illegals were exchanged in a spy swap with Russia rather than prosecuted, exactly as the Volkov brothers had been released in 1992. The pattern suggested that illegal operations occupied a unique space in intelligence conflict, serious enough to warrant arrest, but not serious enough to justify extended imprisonment when diplomatic opportunities emerged. Several participants in the Volkov investigation remained troubled by this pattern. Helen Fahey, the federal prosecutor who convicted the brothers, stated in a 2015 interview, "We proved they conducted systematic espionage over 15 years. They were convicted, sentenced, and then released after serving barely 2 years. What message does that send? That espionage is a calculated risk with minimal consequences? That prosecutions are just theater before diplomatic exchanges? I believe we should honor our commitments. When a court imposes a sentence, that sentence should be served. Otherwise, we're telling hostile intelligence services that their officers face minimal real accountability." Michael Brennan expressed similar frustrations, but understood the broader context. Counterintelligence is never just about catching spies. It's about geopolitics, diplomacy, strategic relationships. The Volkov brothers were arrested during the Cold War and released in a different world. Maybe their continued imprisonment became irrelevant once the conflict that motivated their espionage had ended. I don't know, I caught them. Politicians decided what happened next. That division of responsibility is probably appropriate in a democracy, even when it's frustrating for investigators. The watch shop at 2847 South Joy Street remained vacant for 3 years after Yevgeny's arrest. Local residents remembered Fisher as a quiet, competent craftsman. The revelation of his true identity shocked the neighborhood. Some refused to believe it. Others claimed they had always suspected something was wrong, though no evidence suggested anyone had noticed anything unusual before the FBI arrived. In 1992, a Vietnamese immigrant named Thanh Nguyen leased the space and opened a jewelry repair business. Nguyen had no connection to the previous tenant beyond occupation of the same commercial space, but some customers who remembered Fisher brought their watches to Nguyen, creating odd continuity. Different craftsmen, different identity, same location, same trade. Nguyen operated the business until his retirement in 2018. In a 2017 interview with the Arlington Historical Society, he reflected on the space's history. When I first leased the shop, people told me about the spy who worked here before. Some people seemed nervous, like maybe the place was cursed or dangerous. I told them it's just a room. What happened before doesn't matter. I repair jewelry. I fix watches. Same as any craftsman. The work is honest, even if the previous person was dishonest. That's what matters. The philosophical point resonated beyond Arlington. The Volkov case illustrated how illegals weaponized normalcy, turning ordinary activities, legitimate businesses, and community integration into cover for hostile intelligence operations. Every transaction became suspect. Every relationship potentially false. The corrosive effect on social trust extended beyond the brothers' arrest. How do you identify an enemy who looks like a neighbor, who runs a business, pays taxes, attends church, and repairs your watch with genuine skill? The answer ultimately was that you couldn't, not through casual observation, not through behavioral analysis, not through community vigilance. Detection required systematic comparison of documented claims against independently verified records. It required finding the parking receipt that didn't match, the small inconsistency that revealed larger deception. In counterintelligence training programs developed after the Volkov case, FBI instructors emphasized document archaeology. Illegals can fake behavior, but they cannot perfectly fake paperwork across decades. Eventually, somewhere, a receipt won't match a log entry. A date will be wrong. A signature will show variation. Find the paper trail inconsistencies. That's where illegals become visible. The methodology proved effective in subsequent investigations, but also revealed its limitations. Document archaeology was labor-intensive, requiring hundreds of hours reviewing tax records, visitor logs, parking receipts, and utility bills. It could only detect illegals who had maintained cover long enough to accumulate contradictory documentation. It was useless against illegals deployed for short-term operations or against illegals who maintained perfect documentary consistency. The Volkov case remained instructive precisely because it represented success born from fortunate accident. The IRS audit that initiated the investigation was routine, unrelated to counterintelligence concerns. The parking receipt that exposed the operation was one document among thousands. If Patricia Whitmore had not been particularly thorough, if she had dismissed the discrepancies as database errors, the Volkov brothers might have continued operating indefinitely. Counterintelligence depends on competence, resources, systematic analysis, and luck. The archives hold one final detail, discovered years after the case closed. In 2008, the FBI released portions of its investigative file on the Volkov operation under Freedom of Information Act requests from researchers studying Cold War espionage. Most documents were heavily redacted, protecting sources and methods. But one item, initially overlooked, provided haunting insight into Yevgeny Volkov's psychological state during his years maintaining the Fisher identity. FBI agents searching Yevgeny's apartment in January 1989 had seized hundreds of personal items for evidence analysis. Most items were routine: clothing, toiletries, books. But they found one object that seemed anomalous: a pocket watch, damaged beyond repair, kept in a wooden box in Yevgeny's bedroom closet. The watch was a Soviet-made Poljot chronograph from the 1960s, a model issued to Soviet naval officers. The case was dented, the crystal was cracked, the movement was frozen, hands stopped at 3:17. The watch had clearly sustained impact damage, probably from being dropped or struck against a hard surface. FBI analysts initially cataloged it as potential evidence, perhaps a keepsake from Yevgeny's Soviet naval service, retained sentimentally despite his assumed American identity. The watch was photographed, documented, and stored in evidence lockers. After the trial concluded and the brothers were imprisoned, the watch remained in FBI custody, one item among thousands from a closed investigation. In 2008, a researcher reviewing the released files noticed the watch in the inventory list and requested the original photograph. The image showed the watch's back case, which bore an inscription engraved in Russian Cyrillic: "To Yevgeny, for completion of service, 1970. The inscription revealed something unexpected. This was Yevgeny's personal watch from his Soviet naval service, given to him before KGB recruitment. He had kept it through his transformation into Georg Fischer, through 15 years of maintaining false identity, hidden in a box in his closet where customers and neighbors would never see it. But the watch was damaged and stopped. The researcher contacted Michael Brennan, now retired, to ask if FBI records indicated when or how the watch was damaged. Brennan reviewed his original case notes and found a detail he had not considered significant in 1989. During the apartment search, agents found the watch in its box alongside a small hammer, a jewelry-making tool used for metalwork. Brennan concluded Yevgeny had deliberately smashed his own watch at some point during his years as Fischer. The act was private, invisible, symbolically violent, a man destroying the last physical connection to his real identity, or perhaps destroying time itself, stopping the watch at 3:17, freezing a moment that held some personal significance forever unknowable. "I think about that watch sometimes," Brennan said in a 2009 interview. Yevgeny kept it hidden for years, then deliberately destroyed it, then kept the broken pieces. What does that mean? Was he trying to kill his real identity to perfect his cover? Was he angry at the KGB for making him live as someone else for decades? Was breaking the watch an act of acceptance or an act of rage? I'll never know, he never explained it. But that broken watch tells me something about the psychological cost of being an illegal. You don't just pretend to be someone else. You have to partially destroy who you really are. And maybe that damage is permanent, even after the mission ends. The watch remained in FBI evidence storage until 2015, when it was transferred to the International Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. as part of a Cold War espionage exhibit. It sits in a display case now, positioned beside other artifacts from illegal operations. Forged passports, one-time pad code sheets, miniature cameras. Visitors walk past it daily, most not realizing its significance. The museum label reads simply, Soviet pocket watch, damaged, seized from illegal operator, 1989. 3 inches in diameter, gold-plated case, tarnished with age. Cracked crystal revealing frozen hands. Time stopped at 3:17, marking a moment no one can interpret, commemorating a decision no one witnessed. The watch still doesn't work. It will never work again. But it keeps a different kind of time now. The permanent present tense of historical artifacts, objects that exist simultaneously in their moment of origin and an endless present observation. Visitors sometimes ask museum staff what happened to the man who owned the watch. The staff know the basic story. Soviet illegal, arrested by FBI, convicted, imprisoned, exchanged, returned to Russia, emigrated to Germany, died quietly in 2011. But they don't know about Stuttgart, about the watch repair shop Yevgeny opened under his real name, about his choice to continue the same trade that served as cover during his operational years. They don't know if he ever repaired his own watch. They don't know if he ever wanted to. The museum closes at 7 o'clock p.m. each day. Staff turn off display case lights. Security systems activate. The watch sits in darkness until morning, its hands still frozen at 3:17, its mechanism still broken, its time forever stopped in a moment that belonged to Yevgeny Volkov alone. A moment when a man took a hammer to his past and tried to fix himself permanently in a present that was always false, always borrowed, always someone else's life. Outside the museum, Washington's evening traffic flows along L'Enfant Plaza. Commuters head home. Government offices empty. The Pentagon, 5 miles across the Potomac, begins its overnight operation cycle. Skeleton staff maintaining readiness. Guards patrolling corridors where once, long ago, a watchmaker walked with purpose, carrying timepieces for repair and secrets for transmission. The receipt that exposed him, the thermal-printed parking slip from April 12, 1988, is also in the museum's collection, though not on public display. It sits in archival storage, preserved in acid-free plastic, catalogued and forgotten. 3 inches by 2 inches. Faded blue ink. Date stamp barely legible after 37 years. Such a small thing to end 15 years of perfect deception. Such ordinary evidence to unravel extraordinary effort. But that's the final lesson of the Volkov operation, the truth that haunts every illegal who ever maintained deep cover. You can control behavior, perfect accents, memorize legends, and maintain discipline across decades. But you cannot control every receipt, every document, every piece of paper that records your passage through the world. Eventually, somewhere, something won't match. A date will be wrong, a signature will vary, a parking receipt will contradict a tax form, and someone, somewhere, an accountant, an auditor, an analyst, will notice the discrepancy and wonder why. The watch keeps its broken time. The receipt keeps its damning record. And history keeps its secrets, revealing them slowly, one parking stub at a time. The museum closes at 7 o'clock p.m. each day. Staff turn off display case lights. Security systems activate. The watch sits in darkness, hands frozen at 3:17, marking a moment no one can interpret. In Stuttgart, the watch shop Yevgeny opened after returning from Moscow closed permanently in 2011. New tenants found his workbench still arranged with tools in precise order. loops, tweezers, movement holders positioned exactly as they had been in Arlington 15 years earlier. Muscle memory transcends borders. Training survives ideology's collapse. The receipt that exposed him, thermal printed, 3 inches by 2 inches, sits in the museum's archival storage, preserved in acid-free plastic. April 12th, 1988. Visitor parking, Corridor 8, 47 cents. Such modest evidence to end 15 years of perfect deception. But perfection cannot exist in paper trails. Illegals can master accents, memorize legends, sustain discipline across decades. They cannot control every receipt, every timestamp, every automated system that records their passage through the world. Eventually, somewhere, something fails to match. A parking entry contradicts a ledger. A signature varies imperceptibly. A transaction occurs in 2 places simultaneously. And someone notices. The irony haunts counterintelligence veterans still. The Volkov brothers were caught not through brilliant investigation or technological breakthrough, but through bureaucratic tedium. An IRS accountant doing her job. A parking receipt preserved when it should have been discarded. Routine diligence defeating extraordinary tradecraft. The watch keeps broken time at 3:17. The receipt keeps its damning record. And in archives across 2 continents, files remain sealed, protecting illegals who were never caught. The ones who remembered to match their receipts to their logs, who destroyed the right documents, who left America quietly when history turned. We caught 2 brothers. We never learned how many others checked their paperwork more carefully and simply walked away.